Yeah. All right. Well, the Hangout is live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talking About Survivor. I'm Christiana Ellis.
Hey, and I'm Mike Mateen, pulling up my notes.
Tonight we're about Survivor Ghost Island episode 11, double elimination.
Yes, in a unique way, I thought.
Yeah. I thought it was kind of an interesting way to do it. They've had in the past, for example, the season where they had both tribes move to the same beach but not officially merged yet. They've done that before, but this was kind of like a temporary version of that. But different because it was everyone, when everybody knows that it's a one-time thing, it was an interesting wrinkle. I liked that.
It was. I thought a lot of the stuff that there was a lot of really interesting things in this episode, not just from the construction of it, but also some of the decision making and the way that people were kind of playing, knowing where they were, particularly Michael, I thought was really interesting in this one.
Mm-hmm.
He essentially, though, just ran out of bullets in the gun.
Yeah.
Couldn't defend himself anymore.
Well, I think he's a fantastic candidate to hack on another season. There's no question in my mind about that.
Oh, yeah. And he came close to still pulling this off,
Well, right. Yeah. I mean, there's been several players this season who thought that the reason they were getting voted out is because they were perceived as a threat when that wasn't really what was going on. But with Michael, that was absolutely, it's like, oh, yeah, everybody's fully aware. He's dangerous. We need to get him out.
Yes. Well, and the also other amusing part to this is because it was a tie, he could have, and he voted for Wendell. Had he had voted for Laurel, he would have made it.
There was a lot of tricky game theory type stuff going on in that whole last vote.
Yeah. Well, because that's the thing. They were all kind of all over the place. Like, so if by chance Michael had somehow sussed out that if he could have put a vote on Laurel, if Kellen had tipped that to him,
yeah,
then he could have stayed. But she, but anyway, we'll get to all that. I just thought it was. Yeah. I really liked him going down swinging.
Yeah, I agree.
Really, the only way is if he could have actually found an idol. I think, other than what he did, I think he did the best to sow the doubts that he needed to. With the hand he was playing, he maxed it out. So,
Yep. I think we're on the same page there, but let's jump back to the beginning, where coming back from Tribal Council, Dom is still kind of maintaining the idea that he is relieved that he seems to have guessed right because according to him, he was still not 100% sure who was lying and who was telling the truth, even as they voted last time. Yeah. But he is thankful for Laurel, basically having concluded, I made the right call. I'm glad that she seems to be solidly with us. And she kind of locks in her commitment to them. And Kellen is kind of less enthusiastic about that because she's kind of feeling like, I kind of had thought that I was going to be a little closer in there, and now it seems like it's her. And she's also wanting to push more for the whole Navidi Strong thing, which is complicated by having Laurel come in close like that.
Yeah, the Navidi Strong thing is still just so odd to me because of how many times they switched in the beginning. I just never could get traction. But they seem to be a thing that's working for them in some cases.
The only thing that I think makes it make any sense is not so much that there's really any uniting thing about them that makes it a good alliance otherwise, except that if they decide to hold on to it, they have the numbers. So if they can keep everybody saying Navidi strong, then they have a majority.
Right.
But, numbers aren't everything if people turn, So the problem is you only have the majority so long as everyone stays Navidi strong, but the only benefit to staying Navidi strong is having the numbers.
Right.
And so all it takes is for someone to decide not to be Navidi strong, and then they don't have the numbers, and there's no motivation to switch back.
Right.
So it's kind of you can either choose safety in numbers or making your own move. And at this point in the game, I want to make my own move. And a lot of other people saying, well, I don't want you to make your own move because that disrupts my ability to stay safety in numbers.
Right. Well, I think even just hearing you get described through, I think one of the things that has been working well for it is even just what they've titled it. There's a branding, if you will, element to that of like Navidi strong. Like, why wouldn't you want to be part of Navidi strong? Like that sounds like
it sounds good. Yeah.
Yeah. That's like, what? You don't want to be Navidi strong? That doesn't sound good. You want to be a part. Like, so they've kind of created this culture of like, there's there's even more of a resistance that you have to go over in order to choose to not be part of it. You've got a little bit more friction than just normally switching sides, partly because of how they've all embraced this naming of it,
Yeah.
So I just think
power of branding.
That's what that is. I mean, it's created just another barrier to leaving it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this little psychological hurdle.
Yep.
It doesn't have to be a big one, if people are ambivalent anyway,
A little bit more friction to that decision.
Yep. Yeah. But so in the meantime, we have Dom and Wendell kind of re-up their alliance. And it's interesting that between the two of them, they seem to feel like bringing and Donathan in as a secondary pair is the sort of final four thing that they would be looking to do, which is not, Navidi strong for sure. Right. And so I think that's where Kellen is starting to feel like, well, hey, wait a minute. I'm not sure I like exactly what's happening here. Right. Tell me if I'm the only one who kind of felt this, but Wendell and Dom seem to have kind of a one-way flirty energy, meaning Dom seems flirty with Wendell and not the other way around. I don't know if Dom's gay. I don't even think it necessarily means anything like that, but it's just sort of I picked up on a weird energy there.
I guess, I didn't see that, but I'm not to say that isn't there or easy to read out of it, whether, like you said, whether it's a romantic interest or even just a bro flirting. But I didn't catch that it felt super one way and not the other, but that doesn't mean.
So I should clarify first two things. One is that using the word weird, I hope, is not carry a negative connotation from anybody.
Well, I think when I heard weird, all I think is that it doesn't seem to be based in anything. Like he's not addressing it. That's what I felt like when he meant by weird.
Right. Well, yeah, and also just the sense that I certainly don't think anyone had the impression that Dom is gay, or they've not talked about it or anything like that. But so in any event, I don't mean to suggest that Wendell is not into the alliance, just that I get a flirty energy from Dom to Wendell and a regular non-flirty energy from Wendell back to Dom.
Yeah, could be there.
Anyway, maybe rewatch just that opening conversation between the two, because that's where I kind of felt it.
Okay.
But in any event, Dom is still feeling kind of charged up in the sense that things are going more or less according to plan. You know, like there's been wrinkles, bumps in the road, but he feels like he's managing pretty well. But you can always use more, right? So he goes idol hunting again, and he finds a marked coconut, which was another former fake idol. And it's an interesting element too, again, here to have it be, it's not real, it's still fake, but it's a fairly well constructed fake made of materials that you wouldn't necessarily have had access to here. So perhaps it might be a more convincing fake.
Right.
And so you can potentially use it to make someone else think it's fake, if possible. I don't know. Maybe.
So I had a fleeting thought here that you would have had to be so into Survivor in the fact that, like, what if somebody recognized that it was Jay's fake idol?
Mm-hmm.
Although I guess he could have, and then not only did I think that would be ridiculous for anybody to be able to recognize, other than the stick, obviously, like another idol, especially a fake one that, Jay had or Jay played. And then after even thinking that, I was like, oh, but Dom could have just said, yeah, and now it has power. Because, like the other fake idols that got power,
Right.
So one thing, kind of a silly thing I was thinking about of like, I wonder if anybody would actually be able to, like, went and studied that kind of stuff,
The thing I wondered about, though, when he re-hit it, presumably so that someone else could find it and think it's real, but it wouldn't have a note with it, right?
Right.
Wouldn't that be suspicious if someone found it, but it didn't have a note? I feel like I would be suspicious about that. They always have a note.
I was going to say, unless he had a note and they just didn't.
Well, it came with the note that said that it was fake.
Right. I'm saying unless maybe Dom had an old note from one that grew. No, but they always say exactly whose idol they were.
Right.
So, yeah, that would have been really suspicious.
Now, it's one thing to say, I have it and I can show it to someone or give it to someone, and they don't necessarily ask to see the note. But if someone finds it and it's missing the note, that would be really suspicious, I think.
It'd be incredibly suspicious because you wouldn't even know what to do with it.
Yeah.
Like, you wouldn't know.
Especially, there's been non-full idols. There's been ones that needed some other piece. So with no note, I would my immediate thought if there was no note was someone made this, it's fake. And so if he just hides it and someone draws that same conclusion, then essentially he's just given that fake idol to someone to use as their own. Now, he would, of course, recognize it if someone tried to pass it off as a real one to him. But I don't know. I thought it was a little bit unclear how that was supposed to work if he's just hiding it again.
That's true. So, while I was having these irrational thoughts of whether people would even be able to recognize it specifically as Jay's, you were thinking of an actual true problem of his strategy.
Well, I think it's theoretically possible that someone might recognize it. That occurred to me too. I don't think I would.
I wouldn't have. Yeah.
Yeah. That said, even though it was relatively well constructed and, being made of things that you wouldn't just find lying around your camp, like it's one thing if you say, hey, wait, weren't these beads the same that we had on our flag or something like that? But at the same time, like it looks relatively good, but I don't know that I would say it looks 100% convincing to me.
Right. The only way it would have been convincing, I think, would have been that if he shared it, that he had it, and said, this is Jay's fake idol that is now a real idol.
Right.
Because then it can still look like that because that's what it is. And so it's not you don't have to have a convincing as a real thing because it is real in the context of this game, which is why, coming back to you and now that I'm kind of thinking through it, seems really silly that he just hit it with no note. That just seems like a very unusable way of playing it.
Yeah. But, I guess we'll see if it ever comes up again, because it's also possible that no one will even ever find it.
True.
Although I suppose every single day he can walk by where it was and see if it's still there. And if it seems like a couple of days go by and nobody is taking it, he can get it back himself and maybe do something else with it.
Yeah.
But in any case, that brings us to the immunity challenge. And, we were kind of talking last week about whether we got to immunity really fast, but in this episode, we were done with the challenge at 16 minutes in. It was a new endurance challenge where it wasn't so complicated, but it was kind of I liked the element where if you slip at all, you can kind of recover, but now it's even more difficult.
Yeah, to the point where, like, once you lasted long enough, like, it was nearly impossible if you let it slip. Like, you had a chance, but you just probably didn't. Most of them didn't have anything left in the tank, to get. I think maybe Michael might have been one. I believe I wrote that had it slip significantly, but was able to recover for a fairly long amount of time. But pretty much everybody else, once it slipped, they were only there for another minute or two, if even that. Some couldn't even get it back to click, So, but yes, you had a chance. You had the opportunity,
I wondered how much that ball weighed. Like, my guess is that it wouldn't be really heavy, because just the design of that is such that if you were a little aggressive letting it down, you could potentially end up dropping it on you know what I mean? Like, it would roll out in front of you, but if you dropped it and then moved forward or something, you know what I mean? Or even if it's not you, but just someone else is standing there.
Right.
So my guess is that the ball was not heavy, but it wouldn't have to be, because I think the weight was not in the ball, but in the metal frame holding it up.
Correct.
Yeah. But yeah, it was an interesting challenge, and of course, as we briefly discussed earlier, the idea that they're going to, I guess they randomly picked into two temporary tribes. Like, my first thought was they were doing schoolyard pick, but I guess it was random. They said so later. So two tribes, temporary tribes, where each of them gets to have one person be immune, and each of them is going to send one home. But whichever team has someone last the longer, they get to go second and see what who got voted out from the other person, from the other group.
So there's a reward for being the stronger of the two groups or whatever.
Right. And the theory that, it might change your vote, I guess. I'm not sure exactly how that would play out, but it's theoretically possible.
I think it's more of the advantage of getting to see what people who you may or may not have been aligned with are discussing when you're not part of the equation. I think that's more of the advantage. I don't think anybody would legitimately change their vote,
Yeah. But in any event, it also doesn't necessarily matter so much, that part of it, because each group has got one person immune and one person going out. But in any event, the two groups were Michael, Laurel, Dominic, Wendell, and Kellen, versus Chelsea, Sebastian, Jonathan, Angela, and Jenna. And for the one group to be, given what we were just talking about, Laurel, Dominic, and Wendell all together, with Kellen sort of the person who was like, oh, I'm not sure I wanted Laurel to be getting in close with these guys. But, so it was one of those where, in theory, it's 3 Navidi and 2 Malolo, but with this added wrinkle to it. In any event, that's where the numbers comes in again, is just through dumb luck. They talked about this it ended up with, 3 original Navidi and 2 original Malolo on both sides.
It is amazing how that's been like happening, though.
Yeah, yeah. Now, I mean, obviously, when you have more in the large group, it's more likely to have that happen, right? But in any event, we had a couple of people go out quickly, and in particular, the purple team had a lot of people go out pretty fast, and so Chelsea won for purple, even when there were a lot of people. I think there were still 3 people left on the other side. But then we had some really fun, playful trash talk between Wendell and Dom during that whole challenge.
Yeah, this felt more like the vibe that you were talking about. Not necessarily flirty, but like this was sort of like bro flirty trash talk.
Oh yeah, no, yeah.
And this went, yeah.
Yeah, this definitely felt like, bro trash talk, joking around, that sort of playful ribbing. But it was a lot of fun because it did feel good natured.
Yeah. They were definitely wanting to trash talk each other. There was a little bit of edge to it, but knowing that like the kind of edge that's just definitely going to go away like once they get down.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So it ended up going down to, coming down to Wendell versus Dom. And it went for a long time, and it seemed like Dom was moving a lot more, and it seemed like he was maybe closer to going out. But then kind of all at once, Wendell went out, and Dom won for Orange. And so 16 minutes into the episode, we're already done with the immunity. But we, of course, it didn't seem weird because we knew that it was essentially going to be 2 separate groups, each doing thing. But just from an editing structural perspective, I thought it was really interesting that it did treat it like 2 separate segments.
Yeah.
We followed the plot line of one group and then followed the plot line of the other group before doing both tribal councils. Are you there? You're getting other notifications?
Yeah, something just happened like when my email just like reconnected to my calendar, and so it just started popping up like everything as it was like populating, so I was just trying to get it off.
Okay.
So it's going to keep happening as it like keeps. Actually, I probably could just close this. It happens sometimes, like just randomly my Outlook will like go down and it'll pop up and say like, hey, you're not connected, even if I'm not having it open on my laptop. And so it popped up, and so I just kind of like out of habit while you were talking, I just typed in my password to reconnect it. But then I forgot that as it reloads, the calendar stuff like starts to populate, and so things that happen today or coming up soon, like it puts like 10 things in there. So and then when we have the sound on to talk to you, they just keep popping up. So I have just shut it down, and we are good to go now.
All right. Yeah, I tell you, almost any software program that gives you the option to sound play with notifications or not, I will always turn it off, because whatever the sound is becomes irritating to my brain almost immediately.
Right. But the odd thing with it is because it's essentially like reloading my whole account, it puts it back to the default settings. So as if my sound on my things on my notification sound, because that's the default, comes back on. So it's not. It's a weird thing with our security and like at the university and like some of the layers that have to go through, that it just disconnects you sometimes. And normally I wouldn't like do that while we're talking, but it pops up on my screen and says, hey, you've been disconnected. Do you want to reconnect? Yeah. Type in your password. And I was just like, all right, I'll type in my password. You're talking. I'm listening, Yeah.
Anytime I print something, my printer, like is in power saver mode, and it'll turn on to print whatever it is. But then after it goes back into power saver mode, I get 4 different error messages from my computer telling me it's lost its connection to the printer. And I know that it's just because the printer entered into power saver mode. But anytime I have booted up my computer and printed something, that whole sequence will happen. Anyway.
We could go on about that for an entire show of things that don't want to
related to the topic at hand.
TV stuff. Yeah. Back to where we were. So
I liked the way they structured it, given that they could have been constantly intercutting in between. But I think they were right to maintain the plot threads for each by, not going non-chronological in that way.
Yes, I liked that. It helped you really stay, because there was a lot going on, particularly on the Michael, Dom, Wendell side of it. I mean, I think obviously, especially with Kellen and or Kellen, whatever, however you say it.
Kellen.
That one was a lot more. The Donathan one was mostly like, hey, Jenna's an easy target and isn't really doing much, and also we were warned about her back by. She was the Morgan warned about, right?
It was actually Libby back when.
That's right. That's right. No,
although Kellen was kind of involved in that. See, this is where I was talking earlier in the season about Kellen, Jenna, Libby.
Yep. And now
being like the three young, skinny blonde girls.
We are in episode 9 or 10, depending on how you.
Well, this is episode 11.
11. That's right. So it's called episode 10 on the Wikipedia page, and so I went.
Oh, because of the 2-hour premiere.
Right, and so I said 10 or 9, but I meant 10 or 11. Yeah, and so we're at episode 11, and it's still confusing which one is which. And they aren't even all there yet, and I'm still bringing in attributes from the one who got voted off.
Yeah. Right. So the episode had us deal with the orange team first, which was, Michael knows he's at risk. We start off with Dom planning. Yeah, we're going to target Michael. Everyone kind of knew that was sort of one of the significant possibilities. And this was an interesting element where Michael, about Jonathan's idol, wanted to go and say, can I borrow it just to show it off, to sort of give everyone the impression that I have one? And Jonathan kind of said, no, because if anyone finds out that I gave it to you, then they'll know that I have one and might be mad at me for participating in that. Yes. So I like you, but not enough to put my own game at risk.
Right. So good for Jonathan.
Yeah.
I think had he done it, it would have been okay. Like, I think if he had agreed to it, Michael would have returned it. Michael would have used it for the right purpose. Right. Nobody would have figured out it came from Jonathan until later on, and when it wouldn't have even been a thing. However, just because I like Michael and I think that would have worked doesn't mean that it's in Jonathan's best interest. Just because he doesn't need much, like, he likes Michael. He enjoys working with Michael. He doesn't need Michael to survive. So why take the risk? That he had a calculated risk in his head. And the way this all played out, though, eventually, like, I'm a little nervous for Jonathan, because he kind of got left out of all of this. He was working on this Sebastian thing that nobody was working on.
Yeah. Yeah, he ended up kind of off on his own little loop there instead of more in tune with everything else. But
and had to burn his idol already,
Yeah.
Or didn't have to. He chose to because he was on his own.
Well, at least he didn't play it for Jenna. Just because, I mean, obviously, if he had, then it would have been a tie, Jonathan and Sebastian. And then who knows what would have happened. Because Jonathan's name had been brought up, but not really Sebastian by anyone other than Jonathan.
Right.
So that would have been very potentially hazardous for him. Not to mention the fact that we knew from the confessional that Jenna was like, If he wants to be an idiot and play his idol for me, I will gladly accept and vote him out.
Yeah. And it would have been really hard to watch if he wouldn't have loaned Michael his idol and then given Jenna it.
Yeah.
That would have been, all the good for him that I could say about the Michael thing would have just been lost. So I didn't think he was going to do it, and he didn't do it. And he was a little bit, because he ended up somehow, because I think he and Jenna were close, they didn't, I think that's why they didn't tell him, because they didn't want him knowing because of his relationship with Jenna. So hopefully that's reparable for him, but it does make me a little nervous that he's now got no idol, was on the outside of the vote, and literally just voted for somebody that nobody else was even talking about.
And especially since it will be 100% clear exactly what he did.
Right.
Because nobody else voted for Sebastian. And so of the people in that group of 5, there were the 3 that voted for Jenna because they were Navidi, and that was always the plan. And then Jenna voted for Donathan. Right. And there's one Sebastian vote. Guess who that was from?
Right.
Because if Donathan and Jenna had both voted for Sebastian, for example, Jenna might have still been voted out, but at least it would have been a team thing. Whereas now it's, Donathan was all on his own. He recognizes that Jenna wasn't actually even with him. She was going to turn on him, because he didn't not play his idol for her until after the vote. So he would have to know now she was going to try to vote me out with my.
Yeah. And I just don't know, what the Sebastian thing, why he was, working on that. He was never going to crack into that. They were going for Jenna. So did he just think maybe they were actually...
Well, what he thought...
He thought he was going to take the votes, and he and Jenna were going to vote for Sebastian, and he was going to use his idol to make that work?
Yeah.
That's right.
He thought if Jenna and Donathan both voted for Sebastian, and he played the idol for the person that the other 3 voted for, it would have worked. So if, for example, the other 3 had voted for Donathan instead of Jenna, and he canceled out their votes with his idol, and he and Jenna had both voted for Sebastian, then Sebastian would have gone home. That's what he thought the plan was. And it was always the gamble, I have to play my idol for the person that they decided to vote out.
Right. So in that sense, I mean, now I'm thinking about it, that's not that he's not still going to be kind of on the outside, because it depends when they all come back together and who wants to work with who. Once he'd made that calculation, I give him actually a little bit more, not that I didn't give him credit before, but so the way that he played this out, so he thinks he and Jenna are together because they're the 2 non-Navidis, and the Navidi strong seems to be what's happening. So he could just be that guy who just, hopefully it's Jenna and I'll vote for Jenna, and I'm part of that. But that doesn't win any, it's not down the line, remember that you voted for Jenna when we already got the votes. So if he assumes that he and Jenna are both going to go for Sebastian, and he has to play for the idol for the person who gets the most votes, I think it's actually okay to just play it on yourself no matter what. Because, all right, if we both vote for Sebastian and they all vote for me, Sebastian goes and off of the idol being used. If I play the idol and they all vote for Jenna and we vote for Sebastian, well, Jenna will go, and it will be clear that we had to pick somebody. It was just weird when Jenna decided to put it on him because he hoped that he was going to give her the idol so that her votes wouldn't count, and then he would be the one to go.
Well, part of where she's at, if we've got to put ourselves in her shoes for a moment here, because it's one thing to see her as the one who is going to betray the nice guy who might give her his idol. But it's another thing to say, if she knows, look, we're outnumbered. The other 3 are going to either vote for me or for Donathan.
Oh,
and he has an idol. So I need to convince him either to not play his idol or to play it for me, because otherwise I go home.
No, that part, yeah. I'm tracking with that whole part.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, the choosing to vote for Donathan, I think, is sort of the one that why do you think that vote does anything when he's got the idol? He's likely to play it for himself. I guess, is it that if he gives it to her, and they voted for her, that she then gets to get him out?
Yeah, I think that if they were actually voting for Donathan, then she gets to say, yeah, I was right there with you guys. And it's obviously kind of like, it's fake tea in that sense, right? But at the very least, it's not, she doesn't have to explain to any of them why she voted for them. Whereas now Donathan has to explain why he voted for Sebastian.
Yeah, but I feel like he could be like, you guys didn't include me on this, and we had to pick somebody.
Right, but would you rather have to come up with something like that, or would you rather say, oh yeah, I knew who was going to go home and I was on board?
That's true.
I mean, it's one thing if you can say, well, this is the explanation, and maybe they won't take it personally.
No, that's fair. Yeah, okay, that's helping me get there. Yeah.
That said, it is kind of, from Donathan's perspective, this idea that he thought that it's like, hey, you and me, we're the minority, but we're in this together. Let's see if we can't make something happen. And then for it to be revealed that she was all on board with convincing him to vote, give her his idol, but she was going to turn on him all along. Like, again, we can put ourselves in her shoes, and it's not like she did this terrible, horrible, malicious thing, but it certainly doesn't look good for Donathan that he didn't, that it wasn't an every man for himself thing in his mind, but it was for her.
Yeah.
Although he did end up playing his idol for himself, so.
Yup.
So there's I think a little bit of save yourself first in for both of them, but Donathan had the idol, and that's what wins. Although it's also true that the original discussion when they were making all of these plans was, we're gonna have Donathan be the decoy but vote for Jenna. So that was their plan. So they actually got what they wanted, and Donathan flushed the idol. So that's kind of a unambiguous win for those 3.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
But yeah, so in any event, whoops, I'm getting text messages. Sorry. Don't want it to keep beeping at me. As per the aforementioned stuff. Anyway, when we had the pre-tribal council planning for the other group, we had Michael, who knows he's at risk. Donathan won't loan him the idol. So he still plans to lie about having one, even if he doesn't have one that he can show and pretend that that's his. He tells Kellen, and Kellen seems to believe him. As we see in the confessional, she seems to, think that it's true. But of course, she was also the one that was so sure that her allies were not trying to betray her with the whole Desiree situation. But Dom, I like that he's just not entertaining this idea. It's kind of like, listen, if he had one, he wouldn't tell you. He would just use it. So the fact he's trying to convince you that he has one but didn't show it to you tells me that he doesn't have one. And he is just trying to do anything he can think of, which is a reasonable approach, but that's also why you shouldn't believe him.
Right. But, Michael had obviously already thought through that and had a plan for how he could have an idol to show them.
Yeah.
You know, he was unable to make it work for
Yeah.
You know, and
I think that was yeah. I mean, I think it was sort of the sort of thing like it was fair to ask, but I think Donathan was right for his own interests to not do it. But in any event, we have Kellen say not so sure about Dom's, argument, and so she's thinking, well, in case of an idol, I want to be able to control who goes. So if everyone's thinking it's going to be a 4-1 against Michael, but maybe he has, well, I don't want him to be the one who just decides who it is that goes. So she's going to vote for Laurel, and she decides to try to tell Chelsea and Wendell about this plan, which is a little bit interesting to include Chelsea there just because Chelsea was not in the voting group for that. But this is again where having both groups on the beach there.
Yep.
This whole broader discussion made it kind of interesting. But Wendell was suggesting to Laurel, maybe you should vote for Kellen, and maybe he will too, because kind of the same reason. It's like, well, just in case. But now we've got all sorts of cross-purpose votes. So this idea of, well, if it's going to be 4-1, then maybe you can have one person switch to something else. But now you have 2 of the 4 talking about switching to separate people. And that's how you end up with 5 votes where 4 out of the 5 people got a vote, at least one, and only the person who couldn't get votes at all didn't get any votes.
Right.
So let's see. And the fact that Kellen had her extra vote too, it's like that's where she could make the difference, because if she was right and Michael did have an idol and everyone else was voting for Michael, then his one vote would be enough to decide. But if she had her vote, extra one, she gets to decide. She would decide Laurel. So given that she was persuaded by Michael that he had an idol, and the fact that even if he doesn't and Michael goes home, you could see how she's thinking of that as kind of a win-win, with the only real complication to that being it's not like people aren't going to figure out what happened, and that's going to disrupt any element of the alliance you still had, even if it works.
Well, yeah, I mean, but she did tell them that she had this idea.
Yeah.
So it's not like this came out of the blue for them. So,
well, it was kind of a test, because I think this is where she was still trying to push the Navidi Strong thing, right? Where from her perspective, she's like with the other Navidians saying, well, it's Laurel or Michael, right? So if I do this thing, then we know that it's for sure going to be one of them, even if he does have an idol.
Right.
But what we knew was that even if there was lip service given to the Navidi Strong thing from, the Dom and Wendell contingent, we know from the beginning of the episode that they were actually more interested in doing a 4 with Laurel and Donathan.
Right. But they still... So, yeah, their reason for Michael is not that he was originally Malolo. It's that he's a really good player that they've been trying to get rid of for a while and have not been successful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You only get so many shots at it. So, yeah. And they also were willing to risk, well, although I guess it would have been Wendell had Michael had an idol, chosen to vote for Wendell, and they had all voted for Michael,
Mm-hmm.
But I think they felt confident enough that he did not. So
yeah,
a tough spot. Also, that's what I was going to say after this. Like, I think the 2 people who are still around, who are in the toughest spots right now, though neither is, of course, unsurmountable. I mean, there's so much going on. But I think that leaving this, Kellen and Donathan, look to be in a, Donathan, because not only is he originally the Malolo, but he wasn't included. Mm-hmm. So hopefully when he comes back, and now that Dom and Wendell are still together and strong and looking to do this, and they pull him back in, then he will re-elevate back into what he needs to be doing. Kellen, though, I don't really know, like, if that starts to break down that Naviti strong, like, I don't know where
what else does she have? Yeah.
Because she's used, I think this is her only advantage that she's had, right?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah. So she doesn't have any, I mean, she has won an immunity, I believe.
Yeah, I believe she won one of the individual immunities. I don't.
Well, though, the other thing, now that we're sort of talking through this, that was my initial reaction. I'm reading off my notes, but now that we're a couple of days later, that this may not be, like, Kellen may be the kind of person that people want to keep around for a little bit, because she's been a little skittish, like, a lot of time. Like, I don't think anybody feels like she can win.
Yeah, I could see that. Like, I don't know someone they would keep around on purpose so much as I don't think anyone would perceive her as the biggest threat.
Right. Like, if you're going into this, okay, there's going to be a contingency that's starting to look now at that Wendell and Dom thing. And, even if they don't know who the other people they're looking to work with, that's going to start to be a concern. And at some point, if they come to Donathan and they're like, hey, we heard you're with these guys, those guys are going to smoke you in the end if you go to the finals with them. You need to do something. So then that starts to open that up. And, and Sebastian has, he's done, obviously he's already been a target, especially with, Donathan here, because he's got some strength and he's starting to kind of find his own. Like, I've started to like him more and more as he's gone along. You just got a lot of, like you pointed out, you've got a lot of choices to point at before you get to Kellen, because she's not had a really strong last couple of weeks,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I've liked her here and there, but she's not in a great position right now for sure. So at the tribal council,
she's a little too paranoid at times. Like, and so she's like skittish. I think is about not paranoia.
I feel like I liked her more before last week's episode, but last week's episode where she was so convinced that Desiree wouldn't betray her when we knew that was in fact exactly what was happening, didn't make her look like she had her finger on the pulse of the game.
Yes. And while we can understand what she did here, it was still a little bit at odds with what the rest of her group wanted to do,
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, and it was kind of all over the place eventually. But first, so the first tribal council with the other group, Jenna was really playing up the whole idea that she knew she was going and she wouldn't fight it. And I have to believe that what she was trying to do there was draw the votes to herself with the hope that Donathan was going to play his idol for her.
Right. Even knowing that was an outside shot. Yeah.
Right. Or even maybe she thought was more convinced that he might do it. Because sure. I think if you think it's unlikely, I don't think you deliberately try to draw the votes to yourself that way.
Yeah, that's true.
Alternately, it was all 100% sincere because she was 100% sure she was going out and wanted to get it over with. That's also possible. But I got the impression from the way Donathan dealt with the idol that if he thought that was the situation, he wouldn't have played the idol.
Right.
For that matter, if Jenna was 100% sure that was going on, why wouldn't she have tried to blow up Donathan's idol.
Yep, that makes sense.
But in any event, so she was voted out. And I had a note here. It's like, could be awkward back at camp for Donathan to try to explain that Sebastian vote that from Sebastian's perspective would have come out of nowhere. And it would be really obvious who did it.
Yep.
Yeah. In any event, though, for the second tribal council, we have Laurel bemoaning the continuing Navidi numbers game. And I thought she actually did a pretty good job, given that we knew she was really kind of more in than that. You know what I mean? Like, she was actually had this secret alliance with Dom and Wendell. But she's trying to make it seem like she's still on the outs and frustrated about it. And in the meantime, Kellen is worried because she's trying to, counter the numbers game argument by saying, well, yeah, but, you never know when people might do something weird. Well, everybody seems like they want to vote for Michael, but what if he has an idol? And I have one note here that just says, Michael equals idol king? ? And then we have the fun moment where Wendell and Dom start to whisper to each other, and Kellen is like, Dom Probst points out the whispering, and Kellen's just like, well, I hope it's just the ABCs because I don't know what else they'd be talking about. I thought that was pretty funny.
That was funny.
But so here's what an interesting, weird little, wrinkle to think about this whole thing, obviously. So Dom and Wendell voted for Michael, the person that they actually wanted to have out, and they were pretty sure that he didn't have an idol, so that was always their plan. Kellen had her own plan that we knew about, where she was going to vote for Laurel with her vote and her extra vote, with the hope that if Michael played an idol, it would be Laurel instead. But it was sort of an A or B sort of situation for her. But we also know that Wendell talked Laurel into voting for Kellen. Whereas if Laurel had voted for Michael, it wouldn't have been a tie. Michael would have just gone home.
Yeah. I didn't even think about that.
I didn't either until I was just thinking about the actual numbers here and the fact that what was gained by having Laurel vote for Kellen there, except maybe, first of all, I don't think anybody but Kellen knew about Kellen's extra vote. I don't think she told people that.
No, I think she had just talked about wanting to vote.
Yeah.
Herself to vote for Lauren, so that if Michael had the idol, there would be a vote on Lauren.
Right. So I don't think anyone knew about that. And maybe Wendell was just saying, so if Wendell thinks Kellen just has one vote, which means it's going to be one vote for Laurel, maybe just as a precaution against Michael having an idol, let's make it a three-way tie instead of
got it, because he's working with Laurel.
Yeah.
So he wants Laurel to do that.
He wants to make sure that Kellen doesn't end up getting Laurel out
when he wants to be working with her. Right.
So I've got
idol. There's a like you said, there's a three-way tie, and then they can just get rid of. I guess at that point it would be, well, if Michael had the idol, it would be a two-way tie, and they would just get rid of Kellen.
Right. So if Michael had an idol and Kellen and nobody, and if we're looking at it from Wendell's perspective, they don't know about the extra vote.
Right.
If, plan A, Michael goes home, and that is like if Dom and Wendell vote for Michael votes for somebody, we don't know who, and Kellen might vote for Laurel, he's pretty sure, right? So depending on who Michael votes for, how might that go, right? That's the idea. And it ended up that Michael voted for Wendell, because he was totally out of the loop ultimately, right? He didn't see, because we can't help but wonder. see, I think because Kellen really did want Michael to go is why she wouldn't have told him, by the way, vote for Laurel.
Yeah.
But in any event, it ended up with this weird situation where one vote for Kellen, one vote for Wendell, one vote for Laurel. And then we ended with 2 votes for Michael and 2 votes for Laurel, tie. But because everyone really did want Michael to go home and there's only any vote for anyone else that was on the basis of he might have an idol. So when it became clear that he didn't, that was all it took.
Yep.
But still, it was kind of a little bonkers there. And now we've got an exposed rivalry between Kellen and Laurel. You know, everyone else kind of knew there was sort of, you know, shots across the bow before, but now it's direct.
Correct.
Yeah. So that is, you know, Michael goes out. He goes out classy. You know, he's a good sport about it. You know, again, I still have, I can't quite get over him only being 18. He's very mature for an 18-year-old.
Yes, very much.
Next time, the Navidi family is at an end, although we've had like previews suggesting that 4 or 5 times already. But it also looks like it'll be the family member visit.
It's always a fun one.
Yep. So I think that does it for this time. Did you have any other notes for this episode?
Nope. Covered everything.
All right. Well, good deal. So we're coming up, you know, the final stretch of the season, you know, 2 more episodes and then the finale.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's crazy.
Yeah. So we'll be back next week to talk about episode 12 of Survivor Ghost Island.
Yay.
Yay.